All right, everybody. I'm really excited to be here with you today. So I want to know, does this feel familiar? You are doing everything right. Like you're hitting ambitious goals, you are anticipating challenges before they escalate, and maybe you're holding together your team, the culture, and all of the strategy that you manage. You're doing all these things, and yet somehow the finish line keeps moving. The demands on your plate refill before lunch, and even your biggest wins feel like a blur, let alone time for your personal life of showing up like a partner or a parent or a friend or whatever that looks like for you. Today, you're going to walk away with the framework for how to define enough on your terms, not your parents' terms, your former toxic boss's terms, or your mentor's terms, but on your terms, so that you can walk away from work each day feeling good about the work that you've done, regardless of how much is left. And honestly, in this process, you're actually going to become better at your job. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. As Matt said, I know what it's like to hit every metric and still feel behind. I did everything right and still found myself chasing this finish line that never came. I used to be a managing director leading 7-figure national programs. I scaled growth, I led teams, I hit ambitious goals, I spoke on stages, and I quietly burned out in that process. It was a lot. And it wasn't until I started asking myself, like, what does done even look like? What is enough? Because there's always more to do at work than there's really time for. There's this mounting list, and as senior leaders, the people that I work with are senior leaders, they know this feeling really, really well. And so I started asking this question, and honestly, my coach asked it of me the first time. I had no idea how to answer. But I went through this process that I'm going to take you through today. Things shifted in a huge, huge way. My life and my leadership changed. So that was the beginning. But later on, I took over 5 weeks of real PTO. And by real, I mean work free. No Slack, no email, no doing any work while on vacation. And in that process, I actually increased the revenue of our biggest program at work by 49%. Enjoyed my dang life. So you see photos there of me hanging out in Mexico and on a road trip in California with my husband. I got energy and a whole lot more joy in the process. And now I did that while I was in my corporate career, and now I left corporate. So I help senior leaders get out of the weeds, stop with the day-to-day firefight, build thriving teams that take ownership and enjoy their life again, because you've worked so hard for it. And yet so many of us don't actually enjoy it until someday, until we retire, until we have time. And I'm on a mission to help people enjoy their lives now. Okay, so why does success never feel like success? Well, there's a name for it that some of you may be familiar with, and it's called the hedonic treadmill. So it's this idea that we adapt to success and then we crave more. We start here and we say, okay, this is now our baseline. Now I have to get to here. This is my baseline. Now I have to get to here. And we go further and further up this ladder. And so you don't feel caught up because the bar keeps rising. Like you're like, okay, I'm here. Now I'm here. Now I'm here. And you're constantly reaching because every win sets a new standard. And if you feel this way, like all of the senior leaders that I work with, whether they're directors, VPs, C-suite, you're not failing. You are literally operating in a system that makes enough feel impossible, or like being done with a workday doesn't exist. And fun fact of the day that I was floored to learn a few years ago, some of you may know, but the 9-to-5 was invented over a century ago, and it was designed in the 1860s for machines, not humans. And today we still use it. And so much has changed. And honestly, it's not always the 9-to-5 anymore. It's more like the 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. or the 9 to 10 p.m. And so this concept, this psychological construct of the hedonic treadmill is really getting in our way. And if you're visual like me, I love this bar graph because it literally shows you, this graphic, I should say, literally shows you, okay, if we start here, then the finish line is up here. Like this is where I need to get to. And then once you hit it, you move over a bar and you keep rising and rising and rising. And this might be a goal. This might be how your team operates, but it can also be how much you expect yourself to get done in a single day. So that's why it never feels like we get there. And I want you to take a step back and take 10 seconds, take a minute to reflect. Before we actually talk about redefining enough, I want you to pause. What were you taught that success at work looks like? And this isn't about blame. It's really about curiosity because we are often taught what success looks like by really well intentioned people. But those messages can really get in our way if we leave them unquestioned. And so, whether that's from parents or mentors or a previous boss or society and media at large, what does that sound like for you? It might sound like always be available. It could sound like go above and beyond. Say yes to everything. I'm working with 6 senior leaders right now in a group coaching program, and this is a huge one for them. It might be never drop the ball or stay late and you really have to prove your value. And so, again, these were well intentioned. They might have gotten you somewhere to where you are today, but they're getting in your way. And so, I want you to take a step back and say, what are the scripts of success that I'm running on? And are they helpful to me? And if not, jot them down on a sticky note and literally throw them away or burn them or whatever it is that you want to signify that you're letting go of. Okay, so you're going to do that. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I always laugh when I get to this slide because my old enough script that I didn't even know I was running for years and years and years was get everything done and do it well. And if you know me at all, I'm a recovering perfectionist, as I call myself. So do it well meant do it perfectly. And when I was a lot younger, when I graduated magna cum laude, when I had a job before I graduated college, when I got promoted for the first time, et cetera, when I was a lot younger, that was possible. When I was lower on the org chart and I had less responsibilities, getting everything done and doing it well actually fit. Like I could do that and walk away from work at the end of the day. But as I grew in my leadership, as I took on more projects, as I got promoted, climbed the ladder, honestly, as COVID hit and I entered a matrix organization, that definition of enough that I didn't even know I was operating under killed me. And one day I was sitting there with my coach going, and she asked me the question, like, Alli, what is enough? What is enough such that regardless of what's on your list, at the end of a workday, you feel good about what you've done and you can actually unplug and step away? And I sat there, complete crickets. I had no clue how to answer that question. And so we went backwards instead, and she said, okay, well, if you don't know the answer to that, we'll work on it. But what do you think the script is that you've been running on? And so it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I came up with this script and I realized I'd been running on it for years. And that's for me was step one of saying, okay, this is what I've been doing. Now let's chart the path forward of where are we going from here? We're done killing ourselves in the name of doing everything and doing it all well, aka perfectly. Let's move forward. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the hidden cost of that script that I was running and what you might be running too. So from the outside, I looked like a textbook success story, especially I would say at my age. So I was successful on the outside. I was getting promotions. I was having big wins and exceeding goals. My team was growing and they were getting promoted too. And I was speaking on stages. By all definitions or by all looks from the outside, it looked great. It's kind of like when you look at social media and you're seeing a highlight reel of everybody's life, but you don't know the behind the scenes. That's what this was. So that was the outside. But on the inside, I was burnt out. And for me, that was a quiet form of burnout. It wasn't loud. Most people didn't know. I looked successful, but it was real. I was chronically reactive and felt like I always had to be plugged in, especially if my CEO was messaging me or the founder before we got acquired. That was big. I took way too much home and am incredibly grateful that I have a patient husband, but that's not how I wanted to show up. And I always felt behind, even though you can see on the other side of the screen, I had the promotions, I was exceeding my goals, I was, quote, winning, my team was growing, like all the things were happening, and I still didn't feel that way. So we're going to talk about how to define enough so you can actually unplug. And the research backs this up. So HBR came out with a research study in an article, I think 2 years or last year, actually, January 2024. And I was floored when I read it for the first time because the title says, if you want to be a better leader, stop thinking about work after hours. And so many of us think that if we just spend an hour on the budget projections tonight or get this project done or clear my inbox before my team comes in, because my team was on Eastern time and I was Pacific time. They're 3 hours ahead of me. If I just do these things, I will feel more prepared tomorrow. I will be ahead. I will be on top of it. When in reality, we might think that, but the research shows the opposite. So if you want to be a better leader, you actually have to not just stop working, but stop thinking about work after hours. And so the researchers of this study found that the leaders who mentally disconnect, not just close their laptop or turn off Slack, but truly detach from work, are more effective, they're more creative, and they're more emotionally regulated. And so when we don't define what enough is or what done is, we never really stop working. And our leadership suffers because we're never truly off on one sense. And because of that, we're never truly on either. And if all of this is new to you, like it was to me a couple years ago, reading an article like this can feel like an immense amount of permission. Permission to do something differently, and proof from literal studies that says, okay, if I actually unplug, this is going to be better. So one of my favorite things to say is you don't need a new productivity system. You don't need a new morning routine or to get up at 5 a.m., though I am a morning person. What you really need to know is what done looks like for you. So let's go through it. We're going to talk about 3 ways to define enough so you be done at the end of the day or week or month or whatever it is, and the mindset shift to help you get there. So let's talk about mindset first. I'm curious, if we were like in an actual workshop, how I usually do this, I'd ask you this and I'd want some of your responses. But what would it feel like to know that you'd done enough, even if you didn't finish everything on a given day? Most senior leaders that I work with and myself had never even conceptualized that question. We'd never felt that like, oh, if I felt like I'd done enough, it would feel like X or Y would be possible. But when you start to turn this part of your brain on, it opens the possibility of this being a real thing. And if you're sitting there going, okay, yes, I get that conceptually, but how the heck do I actually do it? Which was my first question. Here's some starter questions that you can use. So what would feel different at the end of the day? How would you hold yourself? How would you carry yourself? What might shift in your mood, your interactions, your body, and maybe even how would you show up at home in your personal life? And for all you recovering perfectionists out there like me, this isn't about getting it perfect. This is literally about starting the dialogue and the conversation in your brain or on paper or with a friend about what this could look like differently. And this is your first spot. And this is actually the first exercise we do in my group coaching program before we get into how to define enough, because it's huge. All right, so let's do the 3 ways. Number 1 is an anchor statement. So high achievers, like we talked about with the hedonic treadmill, usually have a goalpost or a finish line, and then they move it without realizing it. And so an anchor statement brings both clarity and enoughness to your day, especially when everything feels unfinished. And that anchoring determines and defines what success looks like on your terms, not on somebody else's, but on your terms. And this enough is not empty is an example of this. So an anchor statement is a short statement that grounds you when you feel pulled or overextended. It should remind you of what's reasonable and true, not what's ideal, but a total pie in the sky, unrealistic thing that you're holding yourself to. And if you want to come up with your own, I'm going to step back for a second and say there's 3 ways to do this, 3 ways to define enough. And anchor statement is one of them. Your job is not to do all 3. Your job is to pick whichever one speaks to you and feels like it'll be most valuable. And I'll have a recap of all 3 at the end and try it for a week. So if this one speaks to you, the starter questions to help you come up with your own might be, what truly brings me back to presence and clarity? What would help me stop moving the finish line? Or what's the sentence that I want to use to help me shut down at the end of the day? And you will get the slides later from my understanding, but if you want to take a screenshot or take a photo with your phone, go for it. So that's how you do it. Let me take a sip of tea. There we go. Okay, and then examples, because I feel like when I was hosting my company's podcast for years, I'd be like, can you give me an example to bring that to life? Because it's one thing to tell you something, and it's another to show you what this looks like in practice. So that first one, enough is not empty, is from a director of a huge national nonprofit in the US. And she came through a workshop a couple weeks ago, not weeks ago, back in April, so a couple months ago now, and landed on enough is not empty. Because she found that at the end of her workday, she was feeling completely empty. And so for her, she'd done enough before she got to that point. Mine was I did what I could with the time, energy, and resources I had. Think about how freeing that would be versus I got everything done and I did it well. Another example would be I honored my focus and my limits today. So that's an anchor statement. Your second way of doing this is coming up with a recipe for a good workday. So think of this like a recipe in a kitchen. My husband and I love to cook. He's the one that doesn't use a recipe at all. I'm the one that uses the recipe, but we sometimes make adjustments. And so this was me asking, okay, within my control, what are the ingredients that, if present, would help me feel good about how my day went and what I did? So this came with 3 buckets. For me, I was really struggling with energy and boundaries. So I came up with a self bucket. I knew that I felt better when I focused and that I really got good work done and moved projects forward when I focused on the right thing. So I had a work bucket. And then I'm huge on people. I've called myself a people first leader for a long time, and I care about how I treat others. So I came up with an others bucket. Yours might be different, but you want to pick 3 buckets. It might be these 3. You could come up with totally different ones, and then come up with 2 to 4 success markers in each of those buckets. And I want to note here that this is not a dashboard. This is not a scorecard. This is something where you're picking a couple things, and as long as you do some of them, that means success. So this is a screenshot of what I worked on a couple years ago as I was coming up with my own, and then I shared these back and forth with my coach. So this is literally what I used. And as long as I hit 1 or 2 in each of those buckets, didn't matter what got done. That was a good work day for me. All right, and our last version of this is a values-based filter. So senior leaders, like I'm sure all of you, get pulled in 1,000 or 10,000 directions a day. And without an internal compass, we default to urgency over impact. We default to, I used to call it playing whack-a-mole, and it's not fun. But as my mom has told me my entire life, we are human beings. We are not human doings. So this is about measuring success through who you were, how you showed up, not just what you did. So for this one, you're going to come up with 3 words that reflect your best self. And if you're not, you might have words that already fly into your brain. Great, use those. If not, these are some questions that you can ask yourself, journal about, talk through with a friend or your team. And the answers to these will point you to the 3 words. It could be 5, but I like 3. The 3 words that you want to use as your markers for a day. So for me, these became kind, clear, and courageous. And so it was coming back to I'm a human being, not a human doing. So if I went through a work day or a work week and I was kind, I was clear, both up with my CEO, across with the senior leadership team, and with my team as well, and I was courageous in some way or another, then that was a good day. I was done. I'd done enough. So for you, I want you to pick one and try it. Again, not all 3, but pick one. So an anchor statement, if you need a grounding reminder to shift those gears, recipe for a good work day, if you want to measure progress across your day, or a values-based filter, or some people call this a to-be list, if you lead through alignment and not checklists. And I would highly encourage you to try this for yourself and then also bring it to your team and do it with them and see what you all come up with. This isn't fluff. Like so many people think, okay, but I just have to get the stuff done. It all has to happen in this and that. I'm like, yeah, we work in businesses or nonprofits, and that's important. But defining enough isn't about pulling back. It's about locking into what really matters and doing it in a way where we are centered, our teams are centered, and we're actually moving forward more productively and better. So 3 really quick stories for you of leaders who've actually done this. So number 1 is a CMO who used a values-based filter, and he let go over the course of about 2 weeks of being the team's shock absorber, because his old definition of success, or his script that he was running, was happy clients, which to some extent you can control, but not entirely. So he let go of being that team shock absorber, stepped fully into strategic leadership, and then drove year-over-year revenue growth. Another one is the director I already talked about, who came up with enough is not empty. She started walking again, she started playing games with her friend again, felt present, and saw no dip in results. And then me, I've done all three types over the years, which is why I'm here talking with you about it today. But I focused on what matters. I took 5+ weeks, of work-free PTO last year in 2024 as a managing director. I got promoted. I led 49% revenue growth, and it's not on here, but I actually got an 86% raise over the course of 3 years while doing this. So what if this is the real skill? Redefining done isn't lazy. It is, in my opinion, true leadership. It is how top performers stay sustainable, sane, and their teams do too. Because you as a leader impact your team in huge ways. And self-leadership and doing this for yourself is crucial, but the more that cascades for your team, the better. All right, so your turn. It's your turn to pick one of these three and come up with your enough script. And I'm going to leave you with 3 things here. 1, you don't have to earn your rest. 2, you don't have to chase someone else's finish line. And number 3, you just need to define what done looks like for you. So if this sparks something, if you want more tools, thought starters to bring this to your team, I'd love to stay connected. If you scan the QR code, you'll get access to my free newsletter, my LinkedIn profile, group coaching program, a couple other things in there. And the truth is that implementing something like this is so much easier with accountability. So if you want to do this, and I highly recommend, try it, test it for a week, DM me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the worksheet that you can actually use to fill this out. And then I'd love to check in with you and hear how it went. So that's what I've got for you today. Thanks for joining me. And I'm super excited to see what this shifts for you as you go forward. And I think Matt's going to come back and then you're going to hear from Rachel.
Hello. Thank you so much, Alli. So much in there. I'd never heard of the hedonic treadmill, and I've been on it. And the irony of being on it for so long, not realizing I've been running on that thing for a long time. It's amazing how you do keep raising that bar subconsciously, and So my father was even worse. Still is. Really, really interesting. As you were going, there's so much to take away from that, and obviously we all default to personal experience. I'm sure everybody on this session is doing as well. So, what success looked like at work, title, money, managing people, reporting to clients, all of which I was going to be really, really bad at. And I luckily realized quite quickly that the stuff I was good at, I was never going to get rewarded for. There was no career path, which is why I left and ended up doing what I'm doing now. Thank God. As you were talking, we've been talking about AI this week. We've been for years now been talking around the 4-day week and what AI hopefully brings to the world. Rather than replacing humans, it creates output focused and more productive without being having to work harder. And it just felt, as you were talking, that this is leading. What you're creating is more output focused. So actually, you're moving the needle. You don't have to do the whack-a-mole and everything. Is actually what do you do that delivers the most output for you and your organization. Whilst protecting yourself. And it feels very timely that you're putting a structure and a framework in place in the way the world is hopefully going to evolve. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I was just kind, clear, courageous. I loved your recipe for a good work day. You went off that one quite quickly because it was a very good recipe. Do the 2 most important things that day. I thought that was a really good one. We've somebody I've spoken to on our podcast said, "Eat the frog."
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Like you eat that frog first thing in the morning, and everything else is a bonus kind of thing. So, I don't think there are any questions or comments. I think most people are probably doing a lot of self-reflection right now, and probably going to DM you quite soon. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, it was just a really insightful, thought-provoking session for the individual as well, which I love.
Yeah. So 2 things. I mean, one I already said, but if you're thinking through this, like when I went through this in the beginning, I literally was crickets. I had no idea how to answer these questions. So if you get stuck in that place, let me know. Reach out on LinkedIn, DM me, and I'd love to workshop it with you. And the other part is this actually came through this morning. So in my group coaching program, I currently have 6 senior leaders in the pilot, and they just did this exercise last week. And one of them dropped it in Slack this morning of what that outcome has been like for her. And so she's a VP at a tech company. And she talked about how she prepped for the day, what her recipe was, and then said, and I got all my stuff done by 9:30. She was like, I could finish the day now. And she's like, I haven't felt that on top of it or that ahead of the finish line in a really long time. And so this stuff can seem almost frivolous or like, oh, I don't know, that's not for me. I just need to get the work done. When in reality, I think a lot of that's a misconception. If you take the step back and you do something like this, the outcome can be huge, not just for your work, but how you feel personally. And then that ripple effect to your team as well.
Yeah. And your personal life, the people at home.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which often forgotten, but so brilliantly put into your story. So I really do appreciate it. So yeah, please do look up Alli, everybody, if you're watching live or on demand. And for me, thank you so much. Hopefully get to Oregon at some point soon. My wife's been there, said it's one of the most fantastic places on earth. So very jealous, and look forward to chatting again to you at some stage in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Alli. Bye-bye.